Welcome back, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for another episode of the Bulletproof Hygiene podcast. We are beyond excited and thankful and honored to have Dr. Jason Auerbach here with us today, aka Bloody Tooth Guy. We've been Insta stalking him for many years now, and he has grown his following in an amazing way. And we think that he is just kind of an exceptional provider and shares the way that he works very, very well with colleagues, and that he's constantly raising the bar on how to do oral surgery and how to connect with patients, how to connect with other providers on a social media platform. And that's really, really exciting. It's futuristic. It's the way that I think a lot of practices can and will continue to go in the future, but we really look up to him, and we are so thankful to have you here today, Dr. Auerbach.
Thank you so much, Brittany. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the interest, and I'm excited for what's to come.
Yeah, awesome. So I do want to give a little bit of a more thorough intro than that. So Dr. Auerbach is he's an oral and maxillofacial surgeon who is certified by both the American Board of Oral Surgery and Maxillofacial Surgery and the National Dental Board of Anesthesiology. So his dual certification and expertise reflects and enables him to provide patients with a full range of oral and maxillofacial surgeries. So he does a lot of dental implants, advanced bone grafting, exposures of impacted canines during ortho, wisdom teeth extractions, and a lot more. He's originally born in New York, and he attended New York University's College of Dentistry, where he earned his DDS degree and graduated with honors. And then he completed the prestigious Oral and Maxillofacial Surgery residency program at SUNY Downstate Medical Center. Am I saying that right, or should I say SUNY?
SUNY.
Yeah. So his belief in the importance of education and training is evident in his education to the residents at Hackensack University Medical Center, where he volunteers his time. He also is on staff at the Valley Hospital in Ridgewood, New Jersey, and Beth Israel Medical Center in New York, New Jersey. So Dr. Auerbach began focusing and merging exceptional care with the patient experience to form what ultimately would become the basis for Riverside Oral Surgery. And he opened Riverside Oral Surgery in 2007, and in so doing began to realize his vision of providing the optimal patient experience through clinical excellence, compassionate care, and close attention to every detail. So pretty incredible that you've been practicing that long, pretty incredible that you've been practicing and you opened your own practice, Riverside Oral Surgery, in 2007. We want to take kind of a step back and ask what initially inspired you to consider or pursue becoming an oral maxillofacial surgeon?
So, I think a lot of things I believe that in life, a lot of things happen to you. I know that there's a lot to be said about putting yourself in the right position and optimizing your opportunities based on kind of optimizing who you are. But I really kind of found myself in the oral surgery clinic when I was in the early stages of dental school. I went to dental school. I'm from New York. I went to undergrad at Syracuse. I went to NYU for dental school, and I went to NYU for dental school thinking I was going to be a cosmetic dentist in Manhattan. I was going to live this lifestyle and it was going to be great. And I got to dental school and I realized very quickly that really wasn't for me so much. And then I was working for a prosthodontist in the evenings, and the assistant that she had was going into oral maxillofacial surgery. And I just remember thinking it was crazy to do so much more formal education after dental school. But I found myself in the oral surgery clinic. I met some very, very influential people to me in my life. And I found that I had an aptitude for it and a real, clear passion for it. This is before I even really understood the scope of oral maxillofacial surgery. This is when I thought oral surgery was just, exodontia, taking out teeth and things like that. But I fell in love with it, and I had some real significant mentors and champions, and they kind of pushed me through, and I'll be forever grateful. And that's how I ended up in oral surgery.
That's awesome. So you kind of dipped your toe in the water because that's a part of how dental school goes and that development goes. And then you discovered that was a major interest of yours, and you had a deep-seated passion to go in that direction and go further, even though you didn't think initially that much education appealed to you very much.
That's exactly right. I think in anything, You know, a lot of people think like, what am I going to go into? Should I be an oral surgeon? Why do you want to do that? Should I be an orthodontist? You know, people just perceive these professions or these subspecialties as being desirable based on either, you know, the amount of money you can make or lifestyle or whatever it is. But if you're not driven to do this type of stuff, it really doesn't matter how much money. I know that's kind of cliche to say that, but if you don't love what you do, it doesn't matter. So when people ask me, should I be an oral surgeon or should I be an orthodontist? The concept is so crazy to me because they're so different. I understand that they both essentially are at the pinnacle of what dentistry has to offer as far as specialty goes. But it's a totally different human being who's going to be satisfied being an orthodontist from the person who's going to be satisfied being an oral maxillofacial surgeon. So I was very, very fortunate to have found it. It fits who I am. I'm like a problem solver. I want to go in, I want to solve the problem, and I want to move on. The private practice of oral maxillofacial surgery enables me to kind of to fill that love for the business side of things, right? So that's private practice in anything. I think had I gone into any specialty, I would have figured out that part of it. But to be able to marry the two has really made my life, you know, my professional life very, very fulfilling.
Right. That's awesome. Do you think that a lot of providers end up on a path where they discover that like aha and they do find their true passion? Or do you think a lot of people on that journey kind of stick with their initial assumptions and their initial wishes, like despite kind of stumbling over what might be something that they're truly passionate about? Like in your experience, a lot of the dentists that you went to school with, if they initially expected to go into ortho and then found that they're passionate about something else, do you find that a lot of people make that intentional switch to what actually might be the better fit for them? Or do you think that they stick with their initial expectation and kind of the path that they thought they would be on and kind of stay in that direction?
I would hope that people, I would hope to think, or I would hope that people would actually find and follow their path. But this is bigger than dentistry. Most people, unfortunately, live a life where they are doing whatever they are doing and fear switching for 1,000 reasons. And some of them are completely, really, totally justified. Like they have real financial responsibilities that don't allow them to kind of take that risk, or they have responsibilities to, or a feeling of responsibility to their family that they needed to pursue such and such. But, you know, it's unfortunate. A lot of people, I'm 47 years old. I am really just, I believe, coming into my own understanding life to the degree that I do. And I'm sure as I grow, I will continue to understand a lot more, hopefully. But I think that it's an unfortunate reality that a lot of people are in their lives and they're kind of stuck in it. And they're like, they go there because their parent, even dentistry in general, like, okay, my parents want me to go to dental school because my dad was a dentist or my mother was a dentist or whatever it is. Now they're in dental school, but they hate working with people. They hate working with their hands. And now they have this kind of like job that's like a real actual physical labor on top of having to use your brain and run a business and all this kind of stuff. It's unfortunate. So, I mean, I think the unfortunate, not to be redundant or beat a dead horse, but I mean, the unfortunate reality of life is that many, many people, probably the majority of people, are doing things that they'd rather not be doing.
Right. Well, and I resonate so much with what you're saying. And that's honestly kind of the catalyst for Brittany and I existing in Bulletproof Hygiene is we feel that same passion. You know, Jay Shetty would say we're kind of living our dharma in that. Like we found our niche, we love it, we're passionate about it. Like I said, I love it more today than I did 25 years ago. You and I are the same age and I share that same thing. It's like I've stepped into a place where like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And what else can I learn and how can I grow? But I feel like there's a lot of hygienists that are kind of stuck in that place or stuck in those practices where they don't have autonomy and they're not able to really grow and really feel step into the weight of the responsibility that we get to have in really treating our patients comprehensively and helping them live their best lives. So you're speaking to the choir here for sure.
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. And also I think, you know, Charissa and I, and in Bulletproof, we talk a lot about like burnout and we go back to our why and like our purpose and kind of legacy type stuff. And, you know, not to be cliche either, but like you only live once kind of thing, you know, like what do you want your legacy to be, or what do you want at the end of it, and what do you want every single day in regards to fulfillment and knowing your purpose and having clear direction and collaborating with people who are kind of heading in the same direction and have similar values. I think that a lot of the providers that we see, whether it's in hygiene or dentistry, or I'm sure for you in oral surgery, who reach that like point of true burnout, and for some people it happens sooner rather than later, are maybe the people who, chose to continue in a direction because there are certain expectations put on them by either their parents, like you said, or their spouse, or even life obligations, like financial obligations and that sort of thing. But that's where I have experienced the most amount of burnout, in regards to my life and providers around me, is like when people forget about why they're doing this. It isn't a deep-seated passion, it's not something that they truly, in their own knowing, in their own selves, it's not a place where they wanted to go. So I think that that's one of the things that we focus on when we do lecturing and teaching, is like, okay, let's take some steps back, like way before hygiene school. Like, what's your why? Like, what's your come from? Why are you doing this? What is your purpose? Like, what do you want in 5-10 years your life to look like? And not just in regards to your earnings, like that can be definitely a big part of it. That's not a bad thing to focus on, and whatever we focus on is going to grow. So it has to be a part of it, but just making sure that our intentions are firmly seated and firmly founded, and that we're actually intentionally going in the direction that we want to go. And it seems like, just reading about your journey, like kind of that's how your journey has been developing. And I liked one part of your bio, on the Riverside Oral Surgery, website, where it says that you began to focus on merging exceptional care with the patient experience. When I was reading that, I just thought, when you established your own practice and you wanted to merge exceptional care with the patient experience, can you tell us about, like, did you have a shift of perspective in yourself, or was that like a pivotal point for you, or like what made you think in that direction?
So for me, there's so much that went on at that time of my life. For me, so it's 2007. There is a significant kind of financial situation going on in the United States. There's like a bubble and a burst, and I was working in a practice that was a very reputable practice, a good surgeon, and did very good things as far as the patient experience. But it became evident to me, again, things were changing at that time. I lived 6 miles from New York City. There's a pretty sophisticated clientele here, people who expect very, very high level service and care. And the medical dental space was, it was still, you'd walk into the office, there'd be a glass thing, it said doctor's office, and like everything was very kind of obtrusive and resistant to that kind of open communication. Things were changing. Right now, you look at dental offices, exclude the concept of COVID, and it's all open and airy, and everyone wants to intermingle and all that. That wasn't the case in 2007. So I started Riverside. So I take for granted that I'm going to provide the best patient care, period. Like, great results. I'm going to do the best I can from a surgical perspective. But how do we marry that with this, what I define as the optimal patient experience? And not that we always hit it, but we shoot for it every single time. And that starts from the pick up the first phone call. I mean, this is all stuff that is commonplace now, right? We all talk about it, we all know it, but in 2007 wasn't. So I was in Southern California. I was in Laguna. I was at a hotel, which still is I love it. It's of course, now the name just totally escapes me, the Montage in Laguna. And I was there, and my daughter, who's now 17, asked for jelly. It was like she wanted strawberry jelly. They only had grape. They didn't say that. They didn't tell us that they only had grape. They just said yes. And then they figured backstage how to make it happen. So they sent somebody like across the street to a convenience store to get the right jelly. And then suddenly the jelly appeared for my daughter. And at that moment, I was like, well, that's exactly how I want to design my practice. Yes, we make it happen, and then we'll figure it out on the underside, so that nobody needs to really understand how it happens.
Yeah.
So that was a very, very important thing for me. I have this kind of interest. It's interesting to me. It would probably be interesting to younger dentists, hygienists, whatever, who are maybe in a time where they're not exactly sure, they feel slighted or whatever. I was an associate for an oral surgeon who was representing to me that I was going to become a partner. And when that actually came down to it did not come to pass. I don't want to really go into the details of it, but I was put in a position in February of 2007. My second daughter was born. I had agreed and moved into the house that I'm sitting in right now, and I was without employment. So I basically, I didn't know what I was going to do. So I was put in a position which I think oftentimes yields the most positive outcomes in the long run. I was very anxious. I had no clue what was going on. I had a daughter, a new house, and no job. And so fortunately, as an oral surgeon, you can pick up a bunch of, I was working in 9 different offices. And as I started looking for real estate and doing my, networking and contacting people, and fortunately found my first little practice. Started. I found a location and we built it out and started. And so I was very focused as I built it from the ground up on every little detail. I'm a true believer that basically attention to every detail, like just if you're tending to every single detail, it implies that you're attending to any detail. So a patient walks in and the littlest thing, like the toilet paper is actually good, they perceive, they're not thinking that, oh, the toilet paper is good, therefore the dentistry is good, but they know that they're in a place where, like, we're not cheaping out on anything. So I did it that way, and I continue to do it that way. Every office I've built since, and again, we're on number 11 as of last week. That's what we do. We try to duplicate that, and I think we do a good job of that.
Wow, I love that. And it's so true, the way that, the sterilization area looks, the way that the bathroom is kept, the way that first impressions go, the verbiage over the phone, like all of the little details. Yeah, you're right. I don't think that patients make a conscious connection, but they make a subconscious association between those things. Like if you care here, then you're going to care here. This is your level in the bathroom or in the, background, the storage closet, this is this is the way your office runs,
That's right.
And I think that it holds truth, not just in their impression, but in actual practice, because if you are paying attention to those things, it's most likely a part of your set of values. Like it's you as a human, it's not just like, oh, I'm putting on a show to make the bathroom clean. Like, no, I care. I'm meticulous. I care about all these details that overarches all of the areas of my life, including my clinical practice, including my relationships with others, including my follow-up and my this, my that, and the way that I run my business, the way that I treat my team, all of that stuff. So I think that is incredible come from. It's something that I think that Charissa and I are really familiar with. We have incredible practice leaders, in Craig Spodak and Dr. Peter Bolden, and they both have done a phenomenal job of kind of sharing with us the same sentiments, and I love the example that you just gave about, your daughter and the strawberry jelly, because, wow service isn't like giving patients what they expect. It's giving them the unexpected and not necessarily having to say, hey, look what I did. Look, I got you the strawberry jelly we didn't have, but those things become obvious. I think the more that patients interact with a practice who is truly understanding their values, truly has a deep-seated culture of we care and we pay attention to detail and we'll be here for you, long term. It is our dharma. We are here purposefully and intentionally, so I love all of what you just said. That really resonates with Charissa and I.
For sure. And congratulations on number 11. That is awesome.
Thank you. Awesome. I appreciate that. I really do. It's funny. You mentioned Bolden, and I think I saw him on, it must have been Instagram, I guess. And he was talking about, when you talk to people who are successful in the field, one of two things happen. Either kind of like, it solidifies like, okay, I'm doing it the right way because you're doing similar things, or you hear it, you see a light bulb and something goes off. And I think he was talking about, I hope I'm talking about the right situation. I think he was talking about when a patient comes in the room, like a card with their name on it that reads, this room has been specifically disinfected for you and all this kind of stuff. And I loved it. I heard it. I loved it. I don't even think I watched the whole video. It was like 2 seconds. I got a gist of what it was. I enacted it the next day. I mean, it's amazing. So you have the card with the patient's name, and this room is like a little checklist of the things. And we actually put a QR code to our website where they can see the video of what we're doing. And I got to tell you something, patients love it. And it's all because I saw that. Yeah. And that's part of the beauty of this social media. Like, everyone should be able to raise their bar. And if everybody's bar is raised, it's going to cause even more, like a higher level. We're all going to get to this place where the level of care that patients are receiving because of social media and because of like best practices or whatever, it's going to be so high, and it's great. It's great for patients. It's great for our profession. It's great all around. So.
Yeah, that's really cool, Charissa, and we do that too. I wonder. I'm sure that I'm sure that they got that from each other, because I didn't know that you guys did that either. That's really cool.
They set it out on their chair with a blanket and the sunglasses, and we also use the QR code that takes them to where they can leave a review. And yeah, it's awesome.
It's good stuff, no question.
It is great. I love watching the greats, I don't know what else to call you guys, like collaborate on things like that, and just see, like you said, to continue raising the bar and continue seeing how it evolves and how you're never finished and you just continue growing and putting aside egos and things. I love seeing like people who are really successful just put aside their ego and say like, I have so much more to learn. And that's what I'm learning in this season. You know, so much of my life is just like, I have so much more to learn. Like, I'm willing to hear from almost anyone. And I love like hearing about those stories.
It's great. So the collaboration is tremendous. I mean, there are guys, oral surgeons throughout the country, throughout the world for me, who routinely will collaborate, not even so much on, clinical collaboration has always been a hallmark of medicine, surgery, dentistry, whatever it is. But like to collaborate on best business practices, which allows, you know, it used to be like a dirty word, you know, medicine, surgery, dentistry, you shouldn't really, it's a business, but it's not a business, whatever it is. But I think by having a more successful business-minded concept, not remotely compromising care, you actually can provide better care and to more people. You know, you said it before, Brittany, there are so many great practitioners out there, but if they're not great with people or they're not doing the right things, that maybe it gets overlooked and they're not able to provide the care to the people who would really benefit from it. So I think that this whole social media evolution has been really beneficial across the board.
And I think I agree entirely. I think we think about it from a practice standpoint, but from a patient care level too, like you're saying, patients now are realizing, oh, this is the standard of care I should be getting.
That's right.
And really understanding the connection between the health of the mouth and the health of the body, and that they want to be treated comprehensively versus just, you know, taking a tooth out and not seeing anybody for the next 2 years. You know, it's creating that vision and that value for what they deserve and what they should be getting. And it's awesome.
Right. So I want to ask Dr. Auerbach, if there was a piece or a few pieces of advice that you would give to like a general dental office or specialty offices who want to take their practice to that next level, what would it be?
So I'll speak about, so the thing about general dentistry versus specialty dentistry, they're very, very different business models. Mm-hmm. So if I were a general dentist, I would really think about vertical integration in terms of having full scope of care available to patients mm-hmm. under one roof. I say that knowing that I'm dependent on the alternative model being, yielding my success. But as a general dentist, and I know it's going this way to some degree, especially as DSOs Correct. Kind of try to, do that. Mm-hmm. I think it makes sense. So I think being able to provide comprehensive care to your patients under one roof from a general dentistry standpoint is the right model. I mean, clearly. Right. I do think that communication is everything. I always think about it like when I'm on an airplane, if there's turbulence, everyone's kind of bugging out and nobody really knows unless you're like totally chill and whatever, but coming in from New York, everyone's highly anxious. So, there's turbulence. Like if someone just got on, if the pilot just got on, was like, it's a little bumpy, don't worry about it, we're going to be good, no worries. Literally everyone would just chill and everyone would be fine. But the silence is deafening. Mm-hmm. So I think that if you communicate with your patient base, and I think this is across any business, if you communicate with your customers, then you almost can't go wrong. No customer, or very few customers, very few patients will fault you for something going wrong, so long as they understand, and you're being honest and transparent and real and all of that. So I think communication is number one. In specialty dentistry, I think communication is even more important because you're communicating with dentists, referring dentists, who actually are entrusting their patient to you. They're losing revenue by giving that patient to you, and they're concerned that patient might end up somewhere else. So I think that communication with the dentist, having an open line both ways all the time, cell phone, whatever it is key. And I think really just providing the best possible care you can, like not thinking about the money. I've always said, like, always do the right thing. Like every single time, if you do the right thing every single time, you can't lose.
Right.
If you're worried about the money and like, I got to do this, I'm going to try to bang out this like extra whatever or that, you might make another few $100s, which is the mindset of the patient who comes in 50 years ago. Is like the dentist is trying to, whatever. Always do the right thing, never worry about stuff. And if you do that, and I don't mean in a karmic sense, I mean in a real like voice, internal marketing, all that kind of stuff, you do the right thing, it'll come back to you in spades for sure.
Right. It's definitely sustainability when it's done that way. That's what I've seen. And like, just to speak to, I really appreciate that you just said, maybe the most ideal model would be kind of like the hospital model where all the specialties are under one roof, and where like patient care can be streamlined by having interspecialty collaboration in a chairside manner, or like on a one-to-one basis where like people actually collaborate on patient care, and GPs and hygienists can talk to specialists, and a lot of it just happens under one roof. Because working at Spodak, we are a multi-specialty, practice. We're a huge multi-specialty practice. We've got oral surgery, we've got the periodontist, we have the endodontist, we do pros, we do sedation dentistry and all this stuff. Some of the things that I have seen work really, really well in that model are like continuity of care. Like what you're talking about, the communication between providers and from providers to patients works really well and seems to be a lot more streamlined and a lot more easy, because it's not secondary information. A lot of time it's happening face to face, with people, and things aren't forgotten as easily, I think. And, a lot of times the main benefit to patients is they're there with their hygienist, and maybe they need a third molar consultation, and the oral surgeon happens to be here with downtime, and they come chairside, they do the consultation, maybe even the evaluation, maybe they take the CBCT that day if they need to, they update the pano, they discuss, treatment options and treatment plan that day. So it streamlines the experience for the patient, because they then don't have to return for a separate visit. They got a couple things done at once. Now they have a plan they can return for, and their providers just collaborated in front of them, which helps them to see the continuity of care. And they know that in the big picture, they're going to be taken care of. And we're talking about them and planning for them behind the scenes, face to face. So I think that to me, it's been a really enlightening and great experience being able to work alongside specialists and having the experience of listening to them go chairside, how they educate the patients too. Like I learn all the time from our specialists when they go chairside, so it enables me to communicate better to the patients about realistic expectations and prep them for what they might undergo or experience when they go in for their procedure. And another pro that I've seen, is that when there are a lot of providers and specialists and GPs and everyone under one roof, a lot of times that means you get to share high dollar equipment such as CBCTs and panos and iTeros and 3D printers. So that could cut certain long-term costs to the business aspect of things. If you don't have to buy an iTero per provider in 5 different practices, you get to share 1 or 2, or you don't have to buy 2 pano machines and you have 12 doctors and you all use the same, like that sort of thing. I think that's a benefit to the practice too. But really, the things that I've seen go wrong are usually what you just described, which is the lack of communication, or the inconsistency in communication. And I can see how general providers, when they're referring out, how there is a big void there. There is a big possibility that they're now losing that patient, or the specialist doesn't refer them back to that GP, or refers them to a different GP, or they just make different decisions for themselves. So there is maybe some fear, around that sort of thing. So I think that your communication clearly with the providers who are referring to you is probably the best thing that is helping to continue to grow your practice, continue to build rapport with them, and let patients know that even though you are in not that multi-specialty model, they are being taken care of.
Yeah.
Communication.
Yeah, I'm sorry. 100%. I think, like I said, I think communication is key. I think the one downside I've seen on having specialists in offices, and again, as in if I were a general dentist, 100% I would do it. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the kind of shortcomings of the model is sometimes the inconsistency of the availability of the specialist in the office. So if you're a busy practice like you guys have, and you have the guys there on a frequent basis, it's a non-issue. But if you're the guy and you have an oral surgeon coming to your office once a month, and there's some sort of complication or there's some sort of issue and your patient is being put off so that your surgeon can see the patient because you'd want to hold it in. Those kinds of things become like the balance between, is it a business decision or is it what's right for the patient? And in that regard, some things are better handled in a specialist's office because we have availability all the time and we have what we need at our fingertips. But I think if you're gonna do it and you have the patient base, the volume, and you can have someone there with frequency, then again, there's no issue. But it's really important for the general dentist who's thinking about bringing a specialist, forget oral surgeon, any specialist, that if a patient needs an endo, let's say, and you have an endodontist coming 3 weeks Tuesday, you should still send the patient to an endodontist. If you don't do that level endo, you should still send the patient to the endodontist, not just try to fill that guy's schedule if the patient needs the case done.
Right. Let it not be. I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
No. Please go ahead.
So kind of let it not be about ego and politics and more about patient care.
Always patient-centric. Right. Every time patient-centric.
Right.
I have a question because I know you obviously don't work in that model and our practice doesn't either. So we send patients out obviously for endo and conventional ortho and perio and sometimes oral surgery when things are a little bigger than us. Where obviously you have the seat to kind of see those gaps in communication. So tell us where you see those and what you think we could do better to improve that collaboration and improve that communication when we are sending those referrals out.
I really think, honestly, this is old school thinking. I think voice to voice is so important. I think because to really understand the thinking and the mentality of the dentist or the so just so you know, I'm going to take that and then I'll go back into it. We deal with and I'm not trying to like butter you up, but like I recognize the importance of the hygienist in this model for many, 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 many years. I think that you guys are the absolute number one most trusted source by the patient, period. And you're in there, you're like frontline. Again, that's how I really feel. So we do a lot of CE with hygienists and things like that in our area, large things and small lunch and learns and stuff like that, so that you understand what to look for, even basic oral pathology, head and neck exams, just not that you need basic oral pathology, but you know what I mean, certain lumps and bumps and things like that we see that maybe you think is something, that maybe it's not something, or maybe you don't think it's something, but it should be looked at, whatever. So I think that really to understand the thinking process of the person referring over is really helpful. And a lot can be done through email. As much information is great and all of that, but to pick up the phone and be like, listen, I'm going to send this patient over. And any oral surgeon worth their weight is going to say, yeah, send them right over. That should be a standard in our business and really any specialist's business. But basically we want to hear like what you're thinking. Oh, I think this or I think that. And you remember, we have most everyone, I assume, has a CBCT. Not every dentist has a CBCT. So you send a patient over and you think, it looks like maybe there's a root fracture or something like that. Or can you do an apico on this or whatever it is? I want to understand what you're thinking so that I can look and determine whether or not, or help determine whether or not that's a viable concept. A lot of people think, yeah, just do an apico. And then I do a CBCT and the root is in the sinus, blown out, and there's like a tremendous infection, and it's really not a viable treatment plan. And so just an open, again, we're saying the same thing. It's really all about as much information, communication, understanding the thinking process, and that's that. Gotcha.
And I think too, obviously I know you'd agree with this, but I think just having a really great relationship with your specialist to kind of know each other well, know your values, know your kind of core treatment modalities, I think helps as well.
Without question, it has to be more than about like the business of sending the patient. It's so important that you have real relationships. But even not just the doctor, the whole team.
Yeah.
It's really important that my front desk, my patient care coordinator calls your office, and when you, not you, but when whoever's picking up the phone picks up the phone, they know, like, how's your kid or your mom or whatever it is that's going on. Those levels of relationships that are real. I mean, look, we all spend so much time in our professional worlds. Those relationships are real relationships. I mean, and actually that is a testament to my team that I would say I helped build, but I have people who have like legitimately built the team. We have 97 employees now. So our team is quite large, and the culture is really all about like all love, all greatness, best thing for the patient every time, have fun, do the right thing. And then they literally have relationships in all these offices. They go away together, and I think it's great. I love it. So
yeah, I love what you just said. I think a lot of what you just said too, in regards to, we spend more time with each other at work than we do with our families at home, like for the most part, especially I'm sure like for you being a specialist, like I would assume you get a lot of phone calls on weekends and go in for emergencies and that sort of thing. So like we spend so much time with our teams. If it's not that way, I think that leads to burnout too. I think that there's this like political correctness or like this taboo kind of belief that has formed about having relationships with one another, outside of the workplace. But for us, we found just that like morale and team culture, and remembering that we're all humans, and knowing intricate details about each other's lives, even if at work isn't the place to dive into those issues, obviously, like, or
right.
Giving patients the very best care, but like having social events where we just connect with each other as people, like to me is like one of the reasons why Charissa's practice and my practice and your practice are successful, and like why we have not so much turnover, why we have people who stay a long time, why patients continue to come back to us and trust us. It's a lot of what happens in the relationship building that happens on a personal level like that. And what I just realized, actually, I just visited Bloody Tooth Guy this morning on Instagram, and I never realized in your link tree, there's a button that says text me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is like insane to me, because I can only imagine like the number of text messages you get from people, but that just goes to show like how important that connection is for you. Like you're connecting with people who are probably, in a different country or around a different state or whatever. I don't know if it's all oral surgery or if it's all about different things, but like, I love that you're saying like, just be a real human, connect on a real level. Like this will get you the furthest and will enable you to practice the best. Like we totally believe that and have seen that happen like over and over and over again. So it just makes me happy to hear you like corroborate that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, for me, I try to get to as many DMs and texts and things like that as I possibly can. I really do. No one has ever responded on my behalf, ever, not once. It's all me. But it's tough. Most of it is really positive and to be honest, really good for my ego. I get a lot of like love, a lot of really, really nice things said, and that, how I've inspired people and all this. And I think that's great. It's really great. But I think being available, I think that's, so I don't know, you may know this, you may not know this. I was totally anonymous for the first 4 years, right? So
Yes.
Bloody Tooth Guy, nobody, really very few people knew who I was. And then like I came out and it was a whole thing, and it really was like, it blew my mind. It was totally surreal. That day, that experience will forever be like totally like indelibly in my brain and body, because it made me feel like, like a mini dental celebrity kind of thing, right? Without sounding like a whatever.
Yeah.
So, but I think that what made it so successful, if you will, is that it really is me, like totally authentically me. That I've thought about like having people post for me. I've thought about like hiring, like really, I've thought deeply about this whole thing. But the voice is, I don't mean the actual voice, though that too. The voice is mine. So every post I've written. So sometimes I like feel like I'm not into posting. So I maybe go a week and I don't post. Sometimes I'm like really busy or uninspired or whatever it is, or pissed about the fact that I have all these sensitive it's real. It's me, really. So it comes through, and I think that that's appreciated by the audience, literally worldwide, all over the world, which is nuts to me. I mean, I've been invited to I don't know, like 40 countries to speak and this and that. I'm actually, as COVID hopefully really goes away, I really am going to take advantage of them, because I want to like see all these people and go and do stuff. Not that I'm a one to do lectures. I'm much more comfortable with like a Q&A concept, but I'll go and we'll see what happens.
So you just actually answered one of the questions that we had later on. We were going to ask, how long were you doing Bloody Tooth Guy before you released your identity? What made you remain anonymous initially? Like, what made you start that way?
I think not knowing. So I started in 2015. That was a different time for Instagram, and it was a different time for social media in the world. So in 2015, I posted my first couple of pictures of bloody teeth, and it was really just, if you look, I've kept every single post, basically every single post up. If you look back, it's just pictures of bloody teeth. And then I kind of was like, oh, let's get a little artistic. So I started posting like what I perceived as aesthetically pleasing pictures of bloody teeth. And then video became a thing on Instagram, which it wasn't in the beginning. And so I did that. And then stories and whatever it was. So, but to answer your question, I was anonymous because I really didn't know about like the HIPAA association with this kind of stuff. I really just didn't know what was allowed or what wasn't allowed. There's never really been anything on my account that has been identifiable as for a person, and I get consent for everybody. But the fact is like, I didn't know. So I remained anonymous. Plus, I didn't want it used against me by my competitors. So there are, like, I don't want to think in those terms so much, but you have to sometimes. So some people like to talk a lot of shit, and then the more they see you rise, the more they try to bring you down. So I was trying to protect my reputation in that way. And then kind of the world mind shifted, and it's like everyone wants to be on social media and kind of again, I'm not saying I'm a celebrity, and like become a celebrity and whatever. So people went from maybe not understanding it completely to fully wanting to be involved. To like, everyone's like, come in, did you put my tooth on there? Whatever it is. So now my patients know that many of my patients know that I'm Bloody Tooth Guy. And the kids, like the wisdom tooth kids, they all want it. I do an exposure. The kid, I like shake the chain to test the bond. I literally will get a text from the mom, like, did you put this kid's tooth on that thing? And so, so that I was anonymous. Now I'm not. And that's the story of the anonymity.
So those are all things that I think we wonder about too, about the HIPAA. And you've always protected patient information, like everything on your page, like you can't see the person, you give no like identifiable information at all. Yeah. So, but I think the same thing. And I also think about like, okay, if something goes wrong, during this procedure or something like, and you've posted things that like haven't gone ideally, and you're like, oh, this is how I dealt with this, or like, whatever, like that to me, I'm just like, oh gosh, is there any like liability in regards to that? But I guess the reality is like, if something didn't go ideally, it didn't go ideally, and you have to troubleshoot it anyway. Like, it doesn't matter if people are watching or not. Is that kind of your sentiment?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people do a lot of editing on their stories and do videos and then edit and then post it. I never do that. I literally, if you're watching me do a story, it's happening live. I mean, it really is happening live. Not that the entire thing is being recorded with one button, but it's like this and then that. I mean, it's happening at the moment. So yeah, of course, sometimes things don't go right. Sometimes I've thought about the potential positive of that. So if something goes, let's say, a little bit differently, and you have a video recording of it, and it yields some sort of kind of like negative outcome, like God forbid paresthesia or something like that, you have video documented evidence that you didn't do anything outside of the standard of care, and that this just kind of occurred. And thank God it's never gone that way. I've never nothing. But I mean, everything I do is totally within the appropriate standard of care. Right. Nothing out of it. So if there is a negative outcome, which there are in surgery, dentistry, everything that we do, I'll show you. I didn't do anything, like this, what I did. And I don't practice thinking about defensive. Like a lot of people like, you could be sued for that. I never think about that. I always think about just do the right thing. And again, that communication piece, and you don't really have to worry about that stuff.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of value in seeing when it goes wrong, seeing that happens to someone else, seeing how they managed it. I think that goes along with your core value of just being who you are and being authentic. I think that's really important. I think it's sometimes hard for people to relate and resonate if they see like this perfect view of how everything is. I think it just makes you more real, and it probably promotes more people reaching out to you to say, hey man, I saw that happen, and I've had that happen to me, and I loved watching what you did with it, or what would you do in this case? Like, I just think it builds more of the value.
I agree. I appreciate that. I think it's like one of those things, like vulnerability. Like if you try to be perfect, everyone curates their image on social. Most people will try to curate their image on social media. And of course, like if I take a picture of myself and I look fatter versus like I could take it from a better angle and maybe look better, I'm going to put the latter. But at the same time, like you got to show the real. The real is really what's like great. Thankfully, most of my real also yields great. It's great. Like the outcomes are great. The procedures go well, all that stuff, but not all the time. So
I want to ask you about something specific. Actually, I saw recently, I'm 99% sure that it was you, who you were trying to use filler in an interdental papilla. Is that right? Yeah. So there was a dental procedure done, and then the papilla was injured or something, and there was it had a good contact, but it had an embrasure, like a gingival embrasure, I guess. And what was the outcome of that, or how did that end?
So I had never done that before. I had spoken to the patient about it. She was totally all about it. She had gone for a filling, and she blames the Toffel-Meyer band for affecting the papilla. And so maybe I really haven't put a Toffel-Meyer band on since like 1998. Right. So I don't even really know. But I will say that she did have an area there, food entrapment, whatever. So we used a filler. I was questioning like which filler to use. So I called the Tooth Booth. I don't know if you know her. Yes. I love her. She's amazing. Yes. And I was like, which one will you use? She gave me the information. I bought it. I used it. The patient feels better. She's like, yeah, I'm not getting food caught there anymore. Now, I don't know how long it will last, but it worked on her. The patient knew it was like a little bit, not experimental, but it was like off label and all of this stuff. Mm-hmm. She was down with it. I tried it. It's not like a complex procedure. Right. And it worked out well. It really did. And again, my set of my N is 1, so I don't have like a real like any kind of research on it. But it definitely worked for her. So she's happy.
There's no RCTs on this yet. It's not peer reviewed.
Right. Exactly.
But N1, it's going well. Right. That's cool though. That was really cool. I thought that was very interesting.
Like they got a lot of feedback actually. They got a lot of love.
Since we're on the. So go ahead. Sorry.
I'm going to say after this conversation thus far, I'm kind of sad that I don't live closer to New York, because I would totally love to do like a lunch and learn that you guys put on. So in that direction, I want to ask, what do you feel like are the most common things that we as hygienists or general providers miss when we refer people to you?
What do you miss? I don't know. I really don't know that you're missing so much. I do think a lot of time with a lot of dentists, there is kind of this thing like sometimes some dentists are afraid to tell their patients that they need procedures done. Right. That's just a fact of the matter. And so things will occur and things will build up, and typically on like endodontically treated teeth and things that just are like, it's not hurting the patient. There's clearly something going on there. And then ultimately like on Sunday afternoon, now they're swollen. So I think that there's the hesitancy on the part of a lot of dentists to tell their patients. I think maybe because they don't want to upset their patient. I don't really understand the psychology of it completely. To some degree, I think I do, but I think what I have found is, and I think hygienists are better at it than dentists. You guys will always point it out, and you guys will always tell the dentist. And whether or not the dentist say like, oh, let's watch it, like the watching of things in dentistry goes against everything that we know about disease progression and infection and all that kind of stuff. So I think just watching stuff. And I do totally credit you guys will point, good hygienists are on top of stuff. Like you guys are all like crazy attention to detail humans. Not all, of course, but you know what I mean as a general rule. And so finding these little things and just kind of like impressing upon the dentist, like maybe you should look at this or whatever. I think that's kind of the thing.
So we totally agree. Like there are so many fears and the psychology, I think, behind not wanting to deliver bad news, even when it's true in dentistry, I think has a lot to do with the fact that a lot of problematic things are asymptomatic. So patients aren't coming in like, oh, I think I have perio disease. You know, they come in and then we take measurements of their gums and we're like, oh, you have perio disease. And then we have to explain it and go through all the evidence of the fact that they have perio disease, you know? So I think, you know, just in hygiene, some of the questions or the pushback or the difficulty that we have in regards to educating patients about their current health or disease status is, well, I've never heard this before. Well, why doesn't it hurt? Well, I went to a dentist 6 months ago and they didn't tell me this, you know? And it's because I think that there is a fear of losing business because you're delivering bad news. There's a fear of not being believed. There's a fear of, you know, not being liked even, I think, because I think that people in general, I think that this dynamic and this paradigm is shifting now, but in general, I think that people, patients and providers, maybe to some extent, have thought of like medicine as its own specialty and then dentistry and like eye doctors as like their own, like, oh, that's in excess, you know, if you can, then you do those kind of like niche things, you know, not as like all a part of the body. So I think it seems to the public to be like an optional service almost, you know what I mean? So they're afraid that they're going to say no, or they're going to say, oh, well, so-and-so is trying to sell me and I didn't have pain. But it boils back to what we've been talking about this whole time. And that's just excellent communication and really clear communication and documentation, you know, because there's always a percentage of patients who are going to say yes, almost no matter what. There's a percentage of patients who are almost always going to say no, no matter what. And then there's that middle ground where the patients are going to make a decision based on the evidence and the information that you're giving them. And it depends on how well you're educating them and how well you're communicating their current health or disease status, you know? So I think that there's that dynamic and there's just fear involved in that. And there is always like, oh, there's a practice down the street where, you know, if I co-diagnose perio and like, okay, this person needs non-surgical perio therapy. It's mild to moderate, you know, they don't need surgical intervention at all yet, but the person hasn't had pain. They've never heard this before, go through all the evidence. You know, I know that they can go down the street and someone will do a prophy on them.
Right.
You know, so I think that there's a fear of losing business, but at the end of the day, it just has to be like uncompromised. And the more that more practices are not compromising on their treatment standards and not letting fear of being disliked or losing business stop them from communicating to patients the problems that they have, I think the better it's going to be for everyone. You know, the more that everyone's doing it, the better it's going to be for everyone, definitely including the patient.
Yeah, well, I think that there's definitely a paradigm shift in the mindset of the patient in terms of oral health care as being really very, very important, which I think is great, again, for us and for the patients. But I also think that with experience comes a confidence and people, you know, when I finished training, I was a kid. I was 29 years old. I finished oral maxillofacial surgery training at 29. I was fully practicing at 29. And I would walk into the room and I would not be totally confident in myself. I had always in the back of the mind, I look like a kid. People aren't really going to believe me. It takes time for you to really like the fake it before you make it kind of thing, where you're like, you almost don't realize people are actually coming to you for your professional expertise. You don't realize that at first. At first, you like think you're like still practicing kind of. And I think that as you become more confident, it comes through. I mean, when I talk to a patient, I tell them, I used to be like, well, of course, give the patient their options, but you know what the best thing is for the patient. Right. So that's why they're coming to you. So I tell my patients like, yeah, of course you can do this, 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 and this, but this is what I would do. This is really how I would treat my mother or my daughter or my wife or whatever it is. And so like that direct, and again, in my market where I live and work and whatever, being direct is like, you know, this is like what it is here. So, but I don't know that works in every area. But for me, I'm just very much like, yeah, so you're taking out tooth number 5. assuming you're going to replace tooth number 5. So this is what you should do. It's not like, well, you could graft, or maybe you could have a denture, or you could have a bridge. No, you're going to take out your tooth. You're going to want a new tooth. I mean, of course, there's not even a question.
Right.
So that's kind of the way that, basically what I'm saying is, as you go on in your profession, you become much more confident. That comes through. Patients understand that, and it's less of a sell, that it's more of a just like a directive. And that's kind of what it is. Right.
And I think that is very much, Northeast. I think that a lot of Northeasterners do like communicating very directly like that. But I found in South Florida, it's the same, like when we communicate directly like that, like this is exactly what you just said. Like, this is what we would do for our aunt or our mom. Like, I'm giving you the same treatment and the same recommendations as I would, in the same order as I would this person that I love and care about. I think that patients take that really well. I want to go back to what you said about watching things, like providers putting a watch on something, because we just did a podcast episode about being quote unquote conservative versus quote unquote aggressive, and how people kind of tend to wear those things as badges of honor too. Like, oh, that's such an aggressive treatment plan. Like, is it, or are you just treating early disease instead of watching it? Like, right. is using the mildest approach, which is all that's necessary if it's early disease, is that really aggressive, or is that just preventing more advanced disease and keeping the patient from needing a dental implant or needing, and I think that we get stopped up sometimes with like, I think it might be multifaceted, but I think that one end of it is like, we've seen the worst of the worst. And sometimes we compare like, oh, this mild problem is it's just a little problem. So I'm going to compare it with like that severe problem that I saw over there, in our minds. And I'm just generalizing here. I don't, maybe not, maybe this is a me thing, but like, I think generally we tend to think this way, like, oh, this is just like really mild early perio, we're just going to watch that perio. Like, we're going to watch it decline. Then we're going to send you to a specialist in 3 years, and you're going to have mobility and furcations. And like, so I think it goes back to our why, and keeping the patient informed, and continuing to communicate and telling the truth and letting the patient choose, because at the end of the day, they have their own autonomy. They do have a right to choose. If we're confident in coming in, presenting the best treatment options first, and then alternate treatment options afterwards, and saying, you also can do nothing, and this is what will happen if you choose to do that. Like, you really can't go wrong. I think we really, in presenting the very best treatment and providing the very best care, need to start losing the fear of the patient leaving, of the patient being upset, of the patient not liking the information, because you don't have to deliver information in a way that is traumatic or rude or uncaring. You can deliver like hard to deliver information in a way that is caring and considerate and compassionate, and and not lose your humanity in the process.
For sure. Yeah. I think that sometimes, and I put it this way, sometimes what appears to be aggressive is actually the most conservative, right? So, yeah. I think you said it perfectly. I have patients come in and they're like, they have 100 loose or decayed teeth or whatever it is, and they want like that one tooth addressed. And yeah, I can do that. But actually, in my early career, I probably would have done more of that. Nowadays, I really just kind of stand firm, and like, I won't treat a tooth, like I won't even put an implant into a tooth that has an endodontic lesion on the adjacent tooth. Like, no, I just won't do it. So If you want me to do this, which I will, you need to address this situation here, whatever it is. And again, I think that I have the luxury of doing that because I've developed, I've been thankfully successful professionally. So, but like the younger people out there, don't necessarily know like why the implant wouldn't be successful next to a tooth that has an endodontic lesion. Mm-hmm. They also don't necessarily have the luxury of being able to turn patients away who you can't kind of shift their mindset. I pride myself on being able to educate the patient very well generally, and most patients, acquiesce is the wrong word, but most patients understand when I'm done speaking to them the importance of what I'm suggesting and why. But again, I think that sometimes it comes across aggressive, but if you preface it by saying, listen, I know this is going to sound aggressive, but this is why, and many patients will accept it.
Yeah, or I know this wasn't what you were expecting today.
Right. Oh yeah,
wasn't what you were expecting to hear, but I have an ethical obligation. I've got to tell you what's going on here.
That's right.
Yeah, people appreciate that.
For sure.
And I think I want to go back, Charissa, to a question that you asked earlier about like hygienists or dentists, when we're referring to you, miss? Because I think a part of that is like, when I'm thinking of that, if we were, let's say we do refer someone to you for an implant consultation, potential like grafting, implant, whatever, sinus lift, whatever it is. How many times in an appointment like that would you say that you find like an oral cancer lesion or something that they were not referred for? Like, does that happen a whole lot? Like, what are we missing in regards to that? Or does it really not happen very often?
Typically not. It typically, thankfully, typically not.
Yeah.
The prevalence of lesions that are precancerous or cancerous, even in our world, and especially South Florida, you have an older population, younger people, especially now moving down there, especially into the Delray Boca area. But the fact is you have an older population, so you definitely need to kind of keep a lookout. But no, I think you guys, I really do think it actually is the other way. Most of the time we're referred a lesion, the lesion doesn't even bear like mentioning to us. And again, that's because we see so many of them.
Right.
So I think that, no, I think in general, you guys and general dentists do a very, very good job of picking up things, because because sometimes something is kind of within normal limits, but because you don't see a zillion of them, you perceive it as being a little bit out of the norm and you refer that. And I think that's great. I think, to kind of talk about like one other thing about like what you could do to make the referral experience easier, better, whatever, is, so sometimes a patient will come in with a broken tooth or something like that, and the dentist will go see the oral surgeon to have that tooth extracted. There's no like teeing up of the patient in terms of he also, or you also may need the replacement of that tooth. So think about how you want to do that, because sometimes they'll be like, no, I just want to take the tooth out today. My dentist said I just need the tooth out, and I struggle with that because I don't want to make the dentist wrong. Right. But it makes sense to graft, or it makes sense to do an immediate implant or whatever. So I think just kind of like speaking to every potential eventuality. Like if you're taking out an upper molar, you could need a sinus lift. So, I always speak to that. I always say, I'm going to extract the tooth. I'm going to do some bone grafting today. If we have this, and that, we'll be able to put the implant in 3 months. If not, we may need to do some extra grafting. Your sinus is closed, whatever it is. So it's just a matter of like, they've heard it. And so you can refer back to that. And the same thing with the referral. So if we get a referral and the patient's been told like, oh, he's going to build up the bone for the implant, or he's going to potentially put an implant in if he can, it's just the patient's heard that from their trusted source, you or the dentist. And then when they come to us, they're not thinking like we're trying to sell them or something like that.
Right.
I have a follow-up question to talking about the, abnormal soft tissue lesions. I know for our practice, we do our visual, we use the Velscope light once a year. And just in using that for several years, there's times now I've learned, like I'll see something, I'm like, I think that's trauma. Let's give that 2 weeks. I want to come back to me in 2 weeks. Let's see what it looks like. My guess is it's going to be gone, but if it's still there, then we'll refer you out. So with that kind of mentality, what do you recommend when we see abnormal presentation for follow-up? What do you recommend on that front?
I think the 2 week number is like literally dead on from a scientific perspective. It takes that long for epithelial turnover. So if in fact it was traumatic, or even if it's like a chronic irritation, you're going to look at it, and if they come back in 2 weeks, if it's gone, you're done. If they come back in 2 weeks and it's still like questionable, there's no downside in referring, even if you perceive that it's related to some sort of like habitual or chronic irritation kind of thing. Obviously, if it's a sharp cusp or a filling or something like that, restoration, that's something that could be handled. But if it's even remotely questionable, there's no downside ever to referring the patient to have a set of eyes who see it, who that set of eyes sees it a lot. There's no downside whatsoever. I mean, maybe the patient doesn't want it or whatever, but that's actually an example. If you have a surgeon coming in on a regular basis, have the surgeon take a look in your office, document it appropriately, and move on. One thing that you can do is, which you probably do is measure it, right? So, if you're measuring,
we have the probe up next to it. Yeah,
exactly. So you measure, you have a photo, what it looks like, and you can make an objective comparison at some later date.
Description, right? So I think for me, and probably a lot of hygienists, like I know that my education about lesions, like we had to take oral and general pathology, obviously, but I'm sure that the extent of that is nowhere near what you had to take and what you've seen and experienced, and you've done like thousands of biopsies and, whatever. At this point, like for me, I am like paranoid, and you're right, like the perfectionist thing about like, okay, what if I do not refer and this was actually something pathologic in this instance? Like even things like hematomas and fibromas make me nervous, even if I know if that's what it is, because I'm like, yeah, but it's a lesion and I don't have the education, to completely rule this out. And usually that's when we get the GP involved, and they can make that determination as to whether or not to refer. And of course we don't want to refer and waste anyone's time either. We don't want to be referring arbitrarily and just like, oh, there's this area, the patient has, hyperkeratinized tissue on their tongue. Like, let's refer them straight to the oral surgeon. Like, but I think that aren't there instances too where like dysplastic tissue can become like pathologic? Like if something starts out as like a traumatic lesion, can it kind of change into something that is pathologic and should be treated or excised, or not usually?
Yes. Chronic insult can yield change in cell type for sure. Mm-hmm. The biggest issue with oral lesions, mucosal lesions in general, is that the visual description of it does not necessarily correlate with the histologic issue. Right. So, there's this term called leukoplakia, right? And people in training or in school or in whatever learn leukoplakia is like a diagnosis. All leukoplakia, I know that
white plaque.
You probably heard this. It's just a descriptive, right? It means white patch. So if you cut into 1,000 white patches and you take a biopsy, some of them are just going to be hyperkeratosis, a callus. Some of them are going to be mildly dysplastic. Some of them are going to be carcinoma. So you need to really need to be, in those cases, really like concerned. You shouldn't be really concerned, meaning you should definitely look to those lesions as being potentially concerning, especially if they're in areas that are concerning. Ventral tongue, lateral tongue, certain areas back in the retromolar pad, certain areas are more likely to be concerning than other areas. And so I think it's important that if you see something like that, if you see something, say something. There's no downside. There's no, what's the downside? So the dentist says, oh, it's nothing. You know how many times we've seen cases where a tooth extraction happens and they thought it was just like some sort of like periodontal issue. So the dentist takes out the tooth and then closes it. And then 5 weeks later, 6 weeks later, it's still not healed. And they keep trying to debride it and clean it out, whatever it is. And now this person has this fungating lesion in the soft tissue. And it turns out it's squamous cell carcinoma of the gingival tissue into the bone, invasive. And now you have, and this is legitimate stuff. And so now you have a guy who's trying to do his best job, right? He took out a tooth. It wasn't clear, but then it's like, it didn't heal. They're trying to manage it. They don't want to piss off the patient. They're a little concerned, but they don't really know any better. And then now eventually the patient gets to the oral surgeon and it's like, it's real. So I don't really treat oral maxillofacial surgery, oral maxillofacial cancer. I do small lesions and things like that, but I have a partner who's American Head and Neck Society trained, microvascular trained, like can take your leg and suture it to your face and all of that. So he does all that type of stuff for us. But I mean, that type of stuff is real. It's real. Yeah. So you can't be too careful. And I'm not an alarmist. I'm not saying like that. It's not a thing. I mean, it's a thing, but it's not so much a thing. But you just want to be careful. If you see something and it like raises suspicion, and you guys are experienced in doing what you're doing, then tell somebody. There's no downside.
Yeah, I feel like I have seen a lot in the last probably 2 years, more and more internal resorption of teeth. Have you seen that as well? And what do you think's going on there?
Yeah, I don't really know exactly why. I agree with you. I think I don't know if there's an uptick or maybe we're seeing it more because of CBCT. But I do think that, look, I mean, I see it a lot. What do I think about it? I have an endodontist that I work with in Manhattan, who is I have many endodontists that I work with that are fantastic, but I have one in specific in Manhattan, and we work together quite frequently on cases that are a little bit more challenging. And we treat them, and he'll treat them. I mean, I don't treat them. He'll treat them, and patients do well. Most patients, when they have internal resorption, don't feel anything.
Right.
They're totally asymptomatic, and they're like, "What? You want me to take out my tooth that looks perfect?" But I'm like, "Look, there's a big, like, dark hole in your tooth." But so they're willing to say, "Listen, I'm going to give it a chance." And if they do give it a chance and it works, they're happy. If not, you've given it the best chance. Again, most patients, so long as you explain the situation, they're good with it.
Yeah.
You know?
So my husband actually, sorry, I have to add this anecdote. My husband actually just had external resorption on 23 and 24, had the teeth extracted. He had prior trauma to this area. He got hit and jaw surgery, broke his jaws. So I had some hardware, a severe like bony defect there from, 23 and 24 were lingualized, and then like were uprighted and kind of metaled into place. That was many, many years ago, but he actually recently needed them extracted. It was extensive enough. It broke in half, actually, subgingivally. One of them did. I think it was 23. He had 23 and 24 extracted. He had, I guess, site preservation. And then he just had guided bone regeneration in this area, from canine to canine almost. So he's like undergoing this process. So it's interesting to see, too, how quickly his resorption, it was kind of like static for 10 years, didn't change very much. And then it like blew up, pretty much overnight, like blew up and the teeth were clearly not making it. So it's very interesting. I've seen some of that too, but like at what point, so do you just tell patients like, okay, it's asymptomatic, it's not bothering you, this is your option, we can watch that until it does bother you? Or like
some patients, but again, I'm not really one for watching things.
Right.
I do think that you can argue with internal. So I also think, and I didn't comment on this, I'll go back to that. I think that, and I don't know, this is not like scientific at all, but I question as to whether some of these, so I do think we're seeing it more because of the CBCTs, but I wonder if it's occurring more because of this early orthodontics and then like staged orthodontics. I just wonder out loud. Again, zero science, just a question in my brain. But I think that no, I don't think watching anything. So again, the patient might say it's not bothering me. I don't want to do anything about it. And I say, okay, so long as you understand what's going on, I'm here if you need me. And then sometimes they need me, and that's what it comes down to.
Yeah. I feel like here later in my career, I've learned a lot more about traumatic occlusion and how impactful that is with everything from perio to, wear and recession and all of that. How much of what you do with having to take teeth out and cracked roots and that sort of thing, how much do you think that has to do with traumatic occlusion?
So I think that traumatic occlusion plays a very large role in the periodontal health of teeth, right? So I think to the extent that those teeth become non-salvageable, that yields more, oral surgery. But at the same time, I think a lot of that is periodontal. Like I think a lot of I see a lot of isolated recession or mobility or whatever it is, and it's either some sort of like parafunctional habit, habitual, or traumatic occlusion. And I think that most of those things, if they're addressed, can be like halted. And so it doesn't really rise to me doing really anything for it unless it's been missed completely. And that's my feeling on it.
And I have to ask this because I feel like there's a big conversation happening right now. I want to get your thoughts on chlorhexidine versus other types of rinses.
Yeah, so chlorhexidine has been shown to be negative on the fibroblast. So there is, I don't like chlorhexidine. There are other rinses out there. but I would not be the proper person to really speak on them because the science behind them, I think that also more of a perio mindset type of thing.
Right.
But I know definitively, I used to prescribe chlorhexidine, Paradex after every extraction bone graft, but I don't anymore at all. So I think that Paradex, and again, I'm not disparaging the benefits of chlorhexidine, but it's been proven scientifically that it has some negative effects. So I don't use it.
Yeah, inhibits fiber. So that's important. It's really important for us, obviously, if we're trying to regain like a long junctional epithelium, especially after scaling, like fibroblasts and the Sharpie's fibers and everything that's trying to pseudo reattach to the root surface of the tooth. Like it's been a big conversation, I guess, specifically in hygiene more recently. But yeah, we don't love chlorhexidine. We're not big proponents either for that same reason. And like inversely, we like some of the research on tetracyclines, like doxycycline, minocycline, in regards to
low dose anti-inflammatory.
Right.
Yeah, that stuff has been, by the way, there's been data on that for easily 25 years. Yeah. And it's difficult, although if we're thinking that the mindset is shifting, that maybe it becomes easier, it's difficult for a patient to think to themselves, I'm going to be taking a low dose doxycycline, minocycline, whatever, for my periodontal disease, because it's just such a crazy concept to take systemic medication on a daily basis for what they perceive as like their gums are swollen, right? So, but there's tons of great data on the anti-inflammatory properties in that. Plus, they think they're taking an antibiotic, which at those doses, it's not functionally that. But yeah, yes, 100%.
And even site specifically, like even orally, such as like we use vibromycin, which is like a doxycycline suspension in periodontal trays. So we use like these oxygenating like perio trays to treat our patients and like Arrestin and that sort of thing. And supposed like studies that it increases or enhances like osteoblastic function or whatever, like, and I don't know if it's significant enough really at this point, or if there's enough research on it to say like, oh yeah, definitely, or no, definitely. I haven't read enough about it, honestly. Yeah. But I just think that it looks promising on multiple like levels, like the tetracycline family just looks good in regards to perio health on multiple levels, especially versus chlorhexidine. And I've read like a couple studies about doxycycline when treated with chlorhexidine and on, in a site specific way. So it's just interesting. We wanted your opinion on that. Yeah. So can we ask?
Oh, I was going to say with that, obviously you don't need to go into all the options out there, but do you have a go-to now for your post-surgical rinse?
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah.
I've been looking into, and again, just like nothing like that. I've been looking into this thing called Smart Mouth. I hate the name of it because I think it's like just not great. But I do think that they have a good product, and there's science behind it, and they don't have the anti-fibroblast concept. And so, yeah, I think yes, I've been using that to some degree, but I haven't been, maybe I should be, but I haven't really been like noting the differences between just like saltwater rinsing or this. I honestly, I don't really look at it that way. I see my patients a couple of weeks after I do the extraction bone graft. The soft tissue generally heals well. I use a membrane, depending on what I'm doing, different membranes, and thankfully, I don't want to make light of it, but thankfully, the gums heal, right? So for the most part, you take a tooth out, you're doing a bone graft, you're putting a membrane, the patient's generally healthy, they have a good oral hygiene, the gums are going to heal, it's going to be a perfect site, we're going to put an implant in, and that's what it is, Yeah.
Anecdotally, it's hard to tell too.
Exactly.
Good to see the research.
Yeah.
Cool. Can we ask you, actually, I wanted to point something out. Did you know, are you aware that we recently released a book?
I was not aware.
Okay.
I am not aware.
We recently released, Charissa and I just released our book, Bulletproof Hygiene. And this, believe it or not, is a plug, but you'll see where we're going with this. It's not actually just a plug. Bulletproof Hygiene, the guide for finding fulfillment through purposeful, profitable hygiene. And on page 59, we talk about you.
Really? I love that. I love that.
This is
a
what we
bigger
said.
celebrity.
Yes, our favorite Insta famous dental guy. We wrote for an example of social media done well in the dental industry, check out @BloodyToothGuy on Instagram. He created curiosity for his audience by choosing to remain anonymous and never showing his face until recently. He's an oral and maxillofacial surgeon who has posted relatable pictures and videos about 4 times per week since 2015. We didn't do any stalking there, no stalking at all. He tailors his posts to a clearly targeted audience of dental professionals, and his posts are relatively predictable, yet exciting, witty, and humble.
Thank you very much. I love that.
Yeah.
I would love a copy. I will plug that book. You send me that stuff. I will put it out there. I mean, where can we get the book? Amazon?
On Amazon, yeah, on Amazon.
Right. Yeah.
Yes,
I love it. I love it.
So given your extensive success on social media, I hate to just ask about what advice would you give? Because I know it's not a one size fits all thing, but I know that you've spoken to just being authentic and putting it out there, in regards to themes and consistency and that sort of thing. Is there any advice that you could give to dental providers looking to grow their, connectedness on social media with patients or with other providers? What little tips could you give to make them more successful in trying to grow their presence on social media?
So I'll speak to what Bloody Tooth Guy is not at first, and then I'll speak to kind of the way I see social media in general. I think that a lot of people are looking to figure out how to grow their audiences in their practices, right? So I think that people think that there's some sort of correlation between build a strong social media platform and that will yield more success. I look at it the other way. I think that it supports who you are. It supports what you're doing. It's an element of what you need to do in the current world. But it definitely is not something where if you have 3,000 followers versus 8,000 followers, that you're going to have a more successful practice or not. I don't think that there's any correlation. Maybe there is, but I don't think so. I think with that type of stuff, kind of buyer beware. There are a lot of companies out there, organizations, whatever, that will try to feed your feed with kind of stock images and digital stuff, and it literally is so obvious, and it doesn't work, and it's not at all good. Even in my world, we'll put some stuff out there for the Riverside Oral Surgery Instagram account, and the digital images of Happy Thanksgiving or whatever never ever play well. It's all about what goes on, what separates your office, what's your differentiator. So really, pictures and videos of the people that they actually can meet in the offices are so much more engaging. So group pictures, group little things and stuff like that. We don't do any TikTok or stuff like that. I know that's kind of where it's going. No one wants to see me doing a stupid dance. Not that that's bad. It's just not for me. But the many women who work for me will do stuff like that, and I think that it's great, right? So I think that building your professional Instagram needs to show who you are. It needs to showcase what's going on in your office, not so much the outward holiday and National Donut Day, which of course has to be there, but it's certainly only a small part of it. If you're trying to build an account or a social media presence, kind of goes against what I'm about to say. You can't really be trying to. You have to be you, and people will find you. Of course, you want to put yourself out there, right? You want to do the hashtagging and all these kinds of things, and tag other accounts and interact with other accounts, and all the things that everybody knows what they need to do. But there are a lot of guys out there, accounts out there that are kind of copycat of different accounts, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. What makes you different? So if PNW OMS, Ben Johnson out in in Seattle, Ben is amazing at what he does. We do the same things with our hands, but the way he interacts with his audience and the little things that he does are witty and smart and great, and they define his account, and that's why he has built a successful account. Surgical Gourmet in Orange County, California. He does great oral surgery, but he's an amazing chef. So that account shows who he is, and that's why people follow him. not because he takes pictures of bloody teeth or sets them up nice or anything like that. We all do the same thing day to day, but we bring something completely different to the table that people enjoy about us. Some people love me. I assume some people hate me. I get some negative comments like, it makes no sense to spend time doing that, but I do. And so I think really, again, and I say the same kinds of stuff all the time, the authenticity, but the real authenticity is a word that is often used by people who are being inauthentic.
Right.
But I really do think being authentically you will yield the people who the right eyes on you. Social media is really just kind of a microcosm of the world. People, and as you get older, you feel this way more comfortably. People are going to like you or they are not going to like you. Right. And right. It's I'm not right for everybody. And that's what it is. I mean, that's kind of the way. I don't know that I was remotely answering your question.
Yes, no,
tangential thinking, but
100% you did, because I think that that's so counterintuitive for most people, and most people think they have to have some system, or they have to occur a certain way, or they have to copycat someone else who's being successful, even if that's not authentically them. And yeah, I think authenticity is like one of those words that's kind of like growth mindset, where everyone's like, you know, if you don't have a growth mindset, you're like, oh yeah, growth mindset, which is ironic because we talk a lot about growth mindset. But yes, no, I agree. And I think that that's like where the true connectivity comes from. And that's how you build the community, and, you know, the shortcuts. And, you know, I know people can buy followers. That's usually not the best. That's actually an Instagram killer, because I know Instagram tracks certain things and kind of like you buy followers, but none of them are engaging. Well, you're shown even fewer of your followers and like that sort of thing. So that's not, I've learned a lot about that, because a good friend of mine has 1 million followers on Instagram, and she was in the Instagram. She's an Insta yogi. It's at Beach Yoga Girl, Carrie Verna. And she was a good friend of mine. She was a mentor of mine a long time ago, but I picked her brain about all of this stuff. And she was just, you know, giving me the down low about people, the things they do right, the things they do wrong, what she recommends, what she doesn't recommend, kind of thing. And it was exactly what you're talking about, just engagement and authenticity and building it is your brand, but it is really just you, you know, it's just you being you know, kind of thing. So
it has to be.
Yeah.
I think in order for you to have a sustainable anything, it has to be real. You know, you could try in your business, your life, your marriage, whatever it is. If it's not real, it's not sustainable. I mean, you could do anything, like you could do it, but if you really want to do it long term and where it's like effortless forever and growing, it has to be real. Otherwise, it's like a miserable existence. Like,
yeah,
you know.
Totally. Yeah, and I think sorry, Charissa, I'm like so excited right now. I'm sorry. The natural like law of like attraction too, and the people liking you or not liking you, and you're not for everyone, I think is such like a great acceptance to have and good place to be. And I feel like I'm constantly like evolving, and we're all constantly evolving in that direction. So that's really cool to hear you say that too. Sorry, Charissa, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was just going to say, as we wrap this up, I want to make the point, and I love this about your Instagram. And it's almost comical to me, because you oscillate between disgusting bloody teeth and all the good foods that you love to eat.
Yeah,
so clearly it looks like you might be a foodie. Brittany and I want to know what you think the official food of dentistry should be.
The official food of dentistry for me would be sushi. To me, that's the most sensible. Or even maybe like some sort of like tartare, raw fish, but definitely something in that.
Nice. And that goes really well with bloody teeth. So perfect.
It does. Sometimes you can't tell if it's a piece of tuna or a bloody tooth.
Or a piece of gum tissue.
That's true.
That tartare, you can gum it. You can eat it after surgery. It's totally the official food. It's perfect. Tartare is the way. It is the thing.
There you go.
If some of our hygienists or general practitioners or anyone who's listening right now wants to connect with you, or get in on some of the ways that you've been educating and sharing what you know with hygienists and with providers, how can they connect with you best? What's the easiest way to connect with you to kind of learn more or to get in on some of those educational things you offer?
So the best way to contact me is through email. bloodytoothguy@gmail.com is my bloody tooth guy email. I'm also at JMA at riversideoralsurgery.com. If you email JMA at riversideoralsurgery.com, I can, through that venue, get you more in touch with the people who handle the actual hardcore continuing education stuff. I have a lot of people who come and shadow me and observe me, and I love that. I think that that's really, it's great. I think to really come in and see what I do on a day-to-day basis. There's so much about what a lot of people talk to me about oral surgery, and of course I'm an oral maxillofacial surgeon, and then the Instagram side of things. But there is so much that I can offer in terms of just how patient communication and just how to interact with human beings on a day-to-day basis. Of course, the building of a specialty practice and all of these things that are kind of peripherally in my life. They're central to my life. But basically, I really feel very, very fortunate to be in a position where I can share all this stuff. So anyone who wants to come and observe, shadow, whatever, better to go JMA riversideoralsurgery.com. If you want to just kind of talk about merch, bloodytoothguy@gmail.com, whatever it is.
Okay, I was just about to ask you. Thank you. Okay, so bloodytoothguy.com, we can get merch, because I'm pretty eager to get.
So this is the craziness, right? So you would think that I would have that totally worked out, and right? I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. Every single day, people ask me like, "Where can I get that? Where can I get that?" It's not done yet, and it's not done because I don't have the bandwidth, because I'm doing so much. Like, and again, not more than anyone else, but like, I'm not a guy who, like a lot of guys who are out there doing what I do, they're talking about stuff. They provide CE and stuff. They're not actually doing it day to day. So I'm actually doing patient care 4 to 4.5 days a week. Plus I run the business of 11 offices. Plus I do Bloody Tooth Guy. Again, it's a lot, but it's the life I've chosen. But I should be able to put some merch on a website and actually do it. I just can't. I can't figure it out yet. Not that I can't figure it out. I just can't. So soon, I say. I mean, I have. You don't understand how much merch I have. I have probably an OR filled with like surgical caps, sweatshirts, hats, sweatpants, pins. I buy them with the intent of selling them or distributing them, but they just sit there because I don't have the time to do it.
Well,
so
we can take at least 2 hoodies off your hands.
All right, that's a done deal.
Yes.
Send me a book. I'll send you guys hoodies.
Perfect. Perfect.
Well, in the vein of you not having a ton of time, we really want to thank you for yours. It has meant a lot to us. This has been really valuable, and we have really appreciated the collaboration and the connection. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Sincerely, thanks so much for being here. We know that your time is valuable, and thanks for being here with us on a weekend. And we can't wait to see what you do in the future and how you continue to grow and evolve and be on this journey with you, hopefully.
That's great. I love it. Best of luck to you guys. Really, really nice to meet you. I wish you like all the success in the world. I have no doubt. And please really send me that book. And
yeah, it's coming.
All right. Nicely done. Have an awesome weekend. Really nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you too.
Take care.
Bye. Everybody have a great week.
Bye.